Oh,
One day you
my
have to win the
God.
race, my tiny foal.
The morning sun burned red over the desert like an angry eye watching the earth below. Marcus stood at the edge of Copper Valley, a place where the rich came to race and the poor came to watch their dreams disappear into dust. His old leather boots were cracked from walking. His hat was faded gray from years of sun and rain and sorrow. He was 53 years old, but his face looked like it had lived 100 lifetimes. Behind him stood a broken-down wagon, the kind that should have been burned years ago. The wood was gray and splintered. The wheels creaked even when they were not moving. One of the wagon handles hung loose, held together by an old rope that Marcus had tied again and again. This was not a wagon fit for a race. This was a wagon fit for a man with nothing left to lose. But Marcus was not looking at the wagon. He was looking at the 3 foals sleeping in the back. They were impossibly small, just babies. Their legs were thin like branches that might snap in the wind. Their coats were the color of weak coffee and morning mist. Born only 3 weeks ago, they could barely walk without falling. Their eyes were still learning what the world meant. They did not know how to run fast. They did not know how to survive the desert heat. They did not know they were born into a death sentence, not a racing team. Arcus had named them Hope, Ash, and Memory. Hope was the smallest of the 3, with a white star on her forehead like someone had painted a wish on her face. Ash was darker, more serious, with eyes that watched everything like he was solving problems nobody else could see. Memory was the stubborn one, always pushing forward, always trying to do more than her tiny body could handle. They were born on the same night, under the same moon, in the same hour. That meant something to Marcus. That meant everything. He climbed onto the wagon seat slowly, feeling every year of his hard life in his bones and muscles. The leather reins felt heavy in his hands. He had worked for 30 years on a ranch, not his own, but someone else's ranch, someone else's dream. He had broken horses, built fences, fixed roofs, and carried water under the same sun that now burned his face. 30 years of work, and he owned nothing. Nothing except this broken wagon and 3 newborn foals that the world said could never succeed. People were already gathering at the starting line. There were hundreds of them. Rich ranchers from the big cities drove in carriages that shone like polished gold. Their horses were stallions, massive, muscular creatures with coats that looked like silk and manes that flowed like rivers. These were horses born to run. These were horses that cost more money than Marcus had ever seen in his entire life. These were horses that winners rode. The millionaires stood together in groups, wearing suits and hats that cost more than Marcus's whole ranch used to be worth. They laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that comes from people who had always won, who had never known real hunger, who had never lost everything in a single night. They pointed at the other competitors. They made bets on who would win. They smoked cigars that smelled like expensive promises. Then they saw Marcus. First, there was silence. Then there was confusion. Then there was laughter that rolled across the desert like a dust storm. A man in a fancy black suit walked over to Marcus's wagon, his shoes making sounds like expensive leather cracking. He looked at Marcus with eyes that were cold like the bottom of a well. "Old-timer," the man said. "Are you lost? This is a race for serious people with serious horses." Marcus did not answer. He did not move. He simply sat on his wagon seat, holding the reins in his hands, looking straight ahead at the desert road that stretched to the horizon. The millionaire laughed harder. "What are those? Are those baby horses? Did you steal someone's foals?" More laughter came from the crowd. Men in fancy clothes pointed and laughed at Marcus and his tiny animals that could not possibly win a race. But Marcus only whispered something that nobody else could hear. He whispered to the 3 foals sleeping in the back of his wagon. "We run today, little ones," he said in a voice like wind moving through an old canyon. "We run like we have fire in our hearts. We run like someone is watching from the stars. We run because love never dies. We run because I promised. The starting horn blew 3 times. All the other wagons moved forward, the great horses pulling carts filled with heavy supplies, the rich men shouting commands, the crowd cheering for winners they already knew. The dust rose up like a living thing, thick and choking, covering everything in a layer of desert. And then Marcus moved his reins. The 3 foals woke up. Somehow they understood. Somehow, through the distance between their tiny bodies and the weight of all that work, they understood what needed to happen. They stood on their fragile legs. They moved toward the back of the wagon. They looked out at the desert road stretching ahead. Marcus sang to them. It was an old song, the kind that cowboys sang under stars when nobody was listening. It was a sad song, but it was also beautiful. It was a song about love and loss and promises that never break, even when everything else does. The 3 foals heard the song and felt something move inside them, something ancient and powerful and true. They began to run. Their tiny hooves hit the desert ground. Their small bodies stretched forward. Their legs moved fast, faster than legs so small should move. And Marcus, the old man with nothing, drove the broken wagon behind them, singing his song to the sky and the desert and to someone far away who could no longer hear, but somehow still listened. The millionaires watched in confusion as Marcus passed them all. The legend had begun.
The sun was climbing higher in the sky when Marcus's 3 foals reached the first water station. The other riders had stopped their massive horses to drink and rest. The big stallions were breathing hard, their sides heaving like the desert itself was trying to move in and out of their bodies. The wealthy men wiped sweat from their foreheads and looked angry and tired already. But Marcus did not stop. The 3 foals ran past the water station like they did not need to drink. Like they did not feel pain. Like they were running towards something that only they could see in the distance. Hope still had her white star shining bright on her forehead. Ash was moving steadily, his dark coat already dusty but his eyes still sharp and awake. Memory was pushing harder than ever, her small legs moving faster than any foal her age should be able to move. Marcus sat on the wagon seat and sang. His voice was old and cracked like dry wood, but it carried across the desert in a way that made people turn and listen. He was singing the same song he had sung that morning, the song about promises and love and things that do not die when people do. One of the millionaires, a big man named Coleman with a face like a burned brick, shouted at Marcus as he passed. "You cannot win this race with baby horses. You will kill those animals. Stop now before they break their legs in this heat." Marcus did not answer. He simply kept singing. The desert road was long and empty and dangerous. By the time the sun reached the middle of the sky, the temperature had become something that did not feel like heat anymore. It felt like punishment. It felt like the sky was trying to press down on everything alive below it. The dust was so thick that a man could barely see 10 steps ahead. The wind was hot and dry, the kind that sucked water from a person's mouth and made it hard to breathe. Most of the other wagons had fallen far behind now. The rich men realized that this was not going to be an easy victory. They had thought that money could buy speed. They had thought that expensive horses could win any race. But the desert was teaching them a different lesson. The desert did not care about money. The desert did not care about the color of a horse's coat or the size of its muscles. The desert only cared about will. And will was something that money could not buy. By mile 15, only 5 wagons were still moving forward. Marcus's 3 foals were in the front. Behind them came 2 wealthy ranchers with their big stallions. And then came 2 more riders on horses that looked more tired than the horses in front. The crowd that had gathered at the starting line was now confused and angry, and amazed all at the same time. Men who had arrived in fancy carriages started driving along the desert road in their cars, following Marcus and his tiny foals, unable to look away from something that should have been impossible but was happening right in front of their eyes. A newspaper man named Daniel drove beside Marcus's wagon in a Model T automobile, his eyes wide with excitement and confusion. "How is this possible?" Daniel shouted over the sound of the engine and the wind. "How are those baby horses running faster than stallions that cost thousands of dollars?" Marcus did not look at him. He kept his eyes on the horizon. He kept singing his song. His hands held the reins steady and strong, even though they were shaking, not from weakness, but from something deeper, something that felt like the weight of all his years and all his memories pressing down on him at once. Daniel saw something in Marcus's face that he could not understand. It was pain, but it was not the pain of a man losing a race. It was the pain of a man remembering something he had tried very hard to forget. It was the pain of love that had been broken and could never be repaired, except through the running feet of 3 tiny animals. By mile 20, the desert began to show its secrets. The dust swirled around the foals like it was trying to protect them instead of hurt them. The wind seemed to carry Marcus's song forward and push the foals faster. Other drivers and riders started saying things that sounded like magic, things that could not be explained by science or reason. One of the millionaires, a woman named Catherine who had raced horses her whole life, watched the 3 foals pass her with amazement in her eyes. She had never seen anything like it. She had never seen strength like that in such small bodies. She had never seen unity like that between animals. The way the 3 foals moved like they were one creature with 3 heartbeats, not 3 separate animals. "There is something not right about this," she said to the man next to her. "But there is also something very, very true about it." Marcus heard her words carried on the wind. He closed his eyes for just a second, and when he opened them again, there were tears moving slowly down his dusty face. He thought about his daughter. He thought about her laugh. He thought about the way she used to run through the ranch with the same kind of joy that these 3 foals were running with now. He thought about the day everything changed. He thought about the silence that came after. He thought about 5 years of trying to live in a world that had stopped making sense. And he kept singing. The 3 foals heard his voice and ran faster. They ran like they understood that something very important was happening. They ran like they knew that their speed and their strength were not just about winning a race. They ran like they knew they were carrying something precious, something made of memory and love and promises that could never be broken. By the time the sun started moving toward the evening, Marcus's 3 foals had passed every other wagon. They were alone on the desert road now, running together, breathing together, moving forward like they were attached by invisible threads that nobody else could see. The millionaires followed at a distance, watching something that they could not explain and did not understand, but knew they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The desert had spoken. The foals had answered. And the legend was growing stronger with every step. The sun at midday was not a light. It was a weapon. By the time Marcus and his 3 foals reached mile 30, the desert had become a place of pure fire. The ground was so hot that waves of heat rose up in shimmering lines, making everything in the distance look like it was dancing and melting. There was no shade. There was no water. There was nothing but the endless road and the burning sky above and the weight of all that heat pressing down like a heavy hand trying to crush everything alive. Marcus's face was covered in dust and sweat. His old shirt stuck to his body like wet cloth wrapped around bone. His eyes were narrow slits against the brightness. He had experienced heat before, many times, on many days, but nothing like this. This was the kind of heat that made people go crazy. This was the kind of heat that killed horses. This was the kind of heat that tested whether a man's will was stronger than the desert itself. But he kept singing. The 3 foals ran ahead of the wagon, their tiny bodies moving through the heat like they were running through flame and water at the same time. Their breathing was loud and heavy, but they did not stop. Hope was still in front, her white star shining even through the dust. Ash was beside her, his darker coat already dark with sweat. Memory ran at the side, pushing and struggling, always trying to keep up with the others, always refusing to fall behind. The other competitors were far behind now. After 30 miles, only 5 wagons remained in the race. The millionaires had expected to finish in the first group, but their massive stallions were tired. The weight of the supplies, the terrible heat, the length of the distance, it was too much even for their powerful horses. They had stopped to water their animals. They had slowed their pace. They had looked back and saw something that made their faces go pale. They saw the old man and his 3 tiny foals getting farther and farther ahead. At mile 35, the heat became something else entirely. It stopped being hot. It became alive. It became an enemy. The road beneath the wagon wheels looked like it was breathing. The air itself looked thick, like something you could hold in your hands. Birds had stopped flying. Even the bugs had gone to hide in the ground. That was when it happened. Memory stumbled. It was a small stumble at first, just her front left leg hitting a rock hidden under dust. For a moment, she kept running. She kept trying. But then the heat and the distance, and the weight of her tiny body caught up with her all at once. Her leg gave way underneath her. She fell forward, tumbling into the dust. Hope and Ash felt her fall before they saw it. They both turned their heads, their bodies still moving but their attention already behind them. Memory was struggling to get back up. Her leg was not working right. She was scared. She was alone in the desert heat with a hurt leg and no way to move forward. Marcus saw everything. He saw Memory fall. He saw Hope and Ash turn around. He saw the moment when everything could break, the moment when the promise could fail, when the legend could end in dust and death and failure. His heart stopped in his chest like a bird hitting a window. Without thinking, without calculating whether it was smart or dangerous, Marcus pulled the reins hard. The wagon stopped completely. In a race, stopping meant losing. Stopping meant admitting defeat. Stopping meant that all the work, all the distance already traveled, all the hope carried in his old heart, none of it mattered anymore. The other wagons that had fallen behind would pass him now. The race would be lost. But Marcus did not care about the race. He climbed down from the wagon seat slowly, his old bones creaking like wood in wind. His legs were weak from the heat, but he walked toward Memory anyway. The desert sand burned the bottom of his feet even through his boots. The sun felt like it was trying to burn through his skin and bones and reach his heart directly. Memory looked up at him with eyes full of fear and pain. Marcus knelt down in the dust beside the small foal. He did not speak. He did not check her leg or examine the injury or do any of the things that a smart man would do. Instead, he placed his hand on her chest, directly over her heart. He felt it beating, fast and scared and desperate, like a small bird trapped in a cage. Hope and Ash moved closer. They stood around Marcus and Memory, making a circle of protection. They understood something. They knew that this moment was important. They knew that their sister was in trouble, and they would not leave her alone. Marcus closed his eyes. For a moment, it looked like he was praying. Maybe he was. Maybe he was talking to someone who could no longer hear his voice but could still feel his love moving through the desert air. Maybe he was remembering his daughter, the girl who loved horses more than life itself, the girl who had died 5 years ago on a day just like this, hot and terrible and unfair. "Come back," Marcus whispered to Memory, though some people thought he was talking to someone else entirely. "Come back to us. Come back to your sisters. Come back to the desert. Come back to the promise." 3 minutes passed. The desert watched. The sun watched. Hope and Ash stood completely still, their bodies protecting the old man and their sister from the worst of the heat. Then Memory moved. She stood up slowly. Her leg was not broken. Her leg was strong. She looked at Marcus with eyes that seemed to understand something impossible, something that should not be possible, something that made the millionaires who were watching from a distance pull on their reins and feel cold even in the terrible heat. Marcus stood up and walked back to the wagon. He climbed onto the seat. He picked up the reins with hands that were shaking from something deeper than fear. The 3 foals looked at each other. Then they began to run again. But this time, they ran differently. This time, they ran like they were running against death itself. They ran like they were running to prove that love was stronger than the desert, stronger than heat, stronger than pain, stronger than all the forces trying to break them. They ran faster than before. They ran with anger and power and purpose. The wagon bounced behind them, carrying an old man who was crying, singing his song to the sky, keeping a promise that only the dead could hear. The millionaires watched and said nothing. Something impossible was happening. Something that changed the desert forever. The final miles of the desert road were not like the miles before them. Something had changed in the air. Something had shifted in the space between the earth and the sky. The sun was beginning to fall toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and red and gold. The heat was still there, but it was different now, less like a weapon and more like a test that was finally coming to an end. Marcus and his 3 foals had been running for almost the entire day. They had covered 55 miles. 55 miles across one of the harshest deserts in the West, pulled by 3 animals that should have died before they even started. Every muscle in Marcus's body hurt. His hands were bleeding from holding the reins. His voice was gone from singing, replaced by a whisper that only the wind could hear. But the 3 foals were getting stronger. Not just stronger, transformed. Hope's white star was now glowing like it held light from somewhere inside her body. Her legs moved with a power that did not match her size. She ran like she was made of more than just blood and bone. She ran like she was made of will itself. Ash had stopped looking tired. His dark coat was wet with sweat, but his eyes were bright and clear, looking ahead at the finish line like he could see something nobody else could see. Memory, the one who had fallen in the heat, ran the strongest of all. Her leg that had failed her was now her best leg. She pushed off the ground with such force that dust exploded behind every step. The other wagons were no longer trying to catch up. Behind Marcus, the 5 remaining competitors had stopped trying to race at all. Instead, they were following. They were watching. The millionaires had pulled their horses to a slower pace, and they were simply observing the impossible happening in front of them. Their expensive horses were breathing hard and walking. Their faces showed confusion and something else, something like fear, or maybe like they were seeing something that did not make sense in the world they thought they understood. One of the millionaires, a man named Coleman who owned 3 ranches and a mining company, turned to the man beside him. Coleman's face was white like paper. His hands were shaking. "What are we watching?" Coleman asked quietly. "What is that old man doing to those animals?" Nobody had an answer. At mile 60, the mountains began to appear in the distance. The road ahead became clearer. The finish line was close now, maybe 5 miles away, maybe less. Marcus could see the tents where the judges were waiting. He could see the crowds of people who had come to watch the race. He could see the tables where the prize money was sitting, more money than he would see in 10 lifetimes of honest work. But he was not thinking about the money. Marcus was thinking about a girl with dark hair and bright eyes who had loved horses more than anything in the world. He was thinking about the day she fell from her horse and did not get back up. He was thinking about how he had promised her grave, 5 years ago on a day just like this one, that he would run this race. That he would win. Not for fame or money or glory, but to prove something, to prove that love does not die when a body stops breathing. His voice, though it was barely a whisper now, began to sing again. It was a different song this time. It was a song that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his throat. It seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his heart. It seemed to come from the earth itself, from the desert, from the sky, from the very air that surrounded them all. The 3 foals heard the song, and they ran faster. At mile 63, something happened that nobody could explain. The 3 tiny foals seemed to glow. Not like they were burning, but like light was coming from inside their bodies, moving through their skin, shining out into the desert air. Hope's white star became so bright that people had to look away. Ash's dark coat seemed to hold the colors of sunset inside it. Memory's legs moved so fast they became a blur, like she was running not just forward but through time itself. The millionaires saw the light, and pulled their horses to a complete stop. Coleman dropped the reins from his hands. His face was wet with tears that he had not even realized he was crying. Around him, the other rich men were doing the same thing, standing up in their wagons, removing their hats, watching with eyes wide open like children seeing something magical for the first time. "They are not real horses," one man whispered. "No real horses can run like that." But they are, another man answered. I can see them. They are real. They are more real than anything I have ever seen. At mile 68, the finish line appeared. It was not a simple line drawn in the dust. It was a banner hanging between two wooden posts, with words painted on it. The Copper Valley Great Race. Beyond it was a crowd of hundreds of people, ordinary people, poor people, people who had come to watch the rich men race their rich horses and prove how much better they were than everyone else. Marcus could see the people now. He could see their faces changing as they realized what was happening. He could see them standing up. He could see them pointing. He could see them opening their mouths in shock and wonder and disbelief. The three foals were 50 yards away from the finish line. 40 yards. 30 yards. And then Marcus did something that no one expected. He stopped singing. The silence that came was louder than any sound. It was like the whole desert held its breath. The three foals ran the last 30 yards in complete quiet, with nothing but the sound of their hooves hitting the earth, with nothing but the light coming from inside their bodies, with nothing but the power of a promise being kept. 20 yards? 10 yards? 5 yards. The three foals crossed the finish line together. Their hooves touched the ground at exactly the same moment. Their bodies were still glowing. Their breathing was heavy but steady, like they could have run for 10 more miles without stopping. Behind them, Marcus pulled the wagon to a stop, and the wagon wheels crossed the finish line 1 second later. The crowd did not cheer. The crowd stood completely still. The millionaires slowly removed their hats and held them over their hearts like they were at a funeral, or a wedding, or a moment so important that words could not describe it. One by one, the rich men climbed down from their wagons. One by one, they walked toward Marcus and the three foals. Their expensive boots made sounds in the dust. Their faces showed something that money had never bought them, something like respect, something like awe, something like they had just witnessed a moment that would change them forever. Coleman walked straight to Marcus and looked into the old man's eyes. Who was she? Coleman asked quietly, though he did not know why he was asking. Marcus did not answer with words. He only smiled, a smile so sad and so beautiful that several of the millionaires had to look away. The legend had been born. The prize money sat on a table covered with a white cloth. $100,000. It was more money than Marcus had ever seen in his entire life. More money than he could count if he tried for 1,000 hours. Enough money to buy land, to build a real house, to feed himself for the rest of his days without working. Enough money to make him rich beyond anything he had imagined. The judges waited for Marcus to walk forward and claim his prize. But Marcus did not move. He stood beside his three foals, his hand resting on Hope's neck. His eyes were looking not at the money, but at the sky. The sun was almost gone now, falling behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of purple and deep blue. The first stars were beginning to appear, tiny lights in the darkness that was coming. The people waiting began to whisper. The millionaires looked confused. One of them stepped forward, a man who organized the race every year, a man who had seen many winners but never anyone who hesitated before claiming their prize. Mr. Marcus, the man called out, his voice confused and curious. Come claim your prize. You have won the great race. You are the champion. Marcus turned and looked at the man. His face was old, weathered, lined with years of sun and suffering. But his eyes were clear and bright, and in them was something that money could never buy, something that victory could never produce, something that only a broken heart, made whole again, could hold. I do not want the money, Marcus said quietly. The crowd made sounds of shock. People pushed closer to hear better. The millionaires exchanged glances like they were watching a crazy man. Nobody refused prize money. Nobody walked away from winning. I do not want the money, Marcus said again, louder this time. Because I did not run this race for money. I ran it for someone who is not here to see it. I ran it for a girl who loved horses more than she loved her own life. I ran it for my daughter, Sarah. The crowd became completely silent. Marcus walked toward the table with the prize money, but he did not stop there. He kept walking, past the judges, past the millionaires, until he reached the poorest part of the crowd, the families who had no land, no horses, no money, no hope. "My daughter died 5 years ago," Marcus said, speaking to these people, speaking to the desert, speaking to the sky. "She fell from a horse and never stood up again. I was angry at the world. I was angry at God. I was angry at the desert and the sun and everything that took her away from me. I promised her grave that I would do something impossible. I promised that I would prove that love does not die when the body stops breathing." He pointed at the 3 foals. These 3 animals were born on the night of her death, under the same moon. I named them Hope, Ash, and Memory. I brought them to this race not to win money. I brought them to prove that the smallest things can carry the biggest hearts. That the weakest creatures can show the strongest power. That love, true love, never dies. It only changes form. Marcus turned back to the table with the prize money. "I give this money," he said, "to every poor family here. Take it. Use it. Buy land. Buy horses. Buy dreams. Build something. My daughter would have wanted this. She would have wanted it more than anything." The poor family stood frozen, unable to move, unable to believe what they were hearing. Then one person started to cry. Then another. Then everyone was crying, the families, the millionaires, the judges, even the horses seemed to feel something in the air that made them lower their heads. Coleman, the richest millionaire there, walked slowly toward Marcus. "I want to help," Coleman said. "I want to build something for you. Not as payment for the race, but as—" He stopped, searching for words. "As something else. Something more." Marcus looked at Coleman. He saw a man who had everything except understanding. He saw a man who had won 1,000 times and felt empty every time. He saw a man who was seeing, for the first time in his life, what it meant to love something more than you love yourself. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "But what I need you cannot buy." "Then what do you need?" Coleman asked. Marcus looked at the 3 foals. Hope was eating grass from Coleman's hand now, comfortable, trusting. Ash was watching the stars appear in the sky. Memory was resting, her body finally able to rest after the impossible journey. "I need to go home," Marcus said. "I need to go back to the mountain where my daughter is buried. I need to tell her that I kept my promise. I need to let these 3 foals stand on her grave and know that something beautiful came from her death. That love was stronger than loss." 5 years later. The ranch was beautiful now. Not a big ranch like the millionaires owned, but a good ranch. A clean ranch. A place where love lived in every fence post and every blade of grass. Coleman had helped Marcus buy the land, not with the prize money, which had been divided among the poor families of the valley. Coleman had paid for it himself, as a gift, as a way of honoring something he did not quite understand but could not ignore. Marcus was older now. His hair was completely white. His hands were more wrinkled. But he was happy. His face showed it in every line, in every smile, in every moment he spent with the 3 foals that had grown into beautiful, strong horses. Hope was a mother now, with 3 foals of her own. Ash was strong and powerful, the best horse on the ranch, the one Marcus rode when he needed to feel the wind and remember. Memory was wise, she seemed to understand things that other horses did not, seemed to see things that existed between the visible world and the invisible world. Every year, on the day of the race, Marcus would take all 3 horses to the mountain where Sarah was buried. He would tell them stories about the race. He would tell them about the desert. He would tell them about the millionaires who learned that day what love meant. And every year, at exactly sunset, the 3 horses would stand perfectly still over Sarah's grave, and Marcus would sing his old song, the song about loss and love and promises that never break, even when death tries its very best to break them. People came from all over to see Marcus and his 3 horses. They came to hear the story. They came to understand what happened in the desert that day. Some said the horses were magic. Some said Marcus was touched by angels. Some said it was all just coincidence and luck. But Marcus knew the truth. It was not magic. It was not luck. It was love, the simplest, most powerful force in the universe. Love that refused to die. Love that kept promises beyond the grave. Love that transformed 3 tiny, weak foals into creatures of legend. And in the evenings, when the sun was falling and the stars were beginning to shine, Marcus would stand on the porch of his ranch and look out at the desert. He would think about Sarah. He would think about the race. He would think about how the desert had taught him that the smallest things can change the world, that the weakest creatures can show the strongest power, that promises made to the dead are sometimes the most important promises of all. The legend lived on. In every dusty road of the West, people told the story of the old man and the 3 tiny foals. In every saloon, under every starlit sky, the story was told differently each time, but always with the same ending: a man who loved something more than life itself, who kept a promise that defied explanation, who proved that death cannot kill love. And somewhere, on a mountain far away, 3 horses stood guard over a grave, keeping watch through all the seasons, all the years, all the time that passes between the living world and the world beyond. The love never died. The promise was kept. The legend was eternal.